Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and it's always a delight to have with us Liz Peek. She is a columnist for foxnews.com and for Fiscal Times. And let me encourage you, if you want to track some of her writings and articles, you can go there, and that is foxnews.com and Fiscal Times. And also you see her on some of the variety news shows as well. But what a delight to have her back with us today. Hi, Liz. Good to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Okay, hopefully we get this audio figured out. Hey, listen, so much to talk to you about. What do you think of the Ninth Circuit's move against the president?
Well, I think it's a very activist court, and I think it shuts down a program and some initiatives that are actually very much needed. I wrote a piece today about some of the refugees coming into our country from Kenya and from Australia, deals that Obama made on his way out of office. And, you know, these refugee groups are not particularly vetted. In Kenya, for example, they're sending several hundred Somalis to our country, people that, according to the Kenyan government, have been involved in some terrorist attacks, or I shouldn't say the people who are coming have been involved, but this refugee camp that they're trying to close has been implicated in terms of some of the terrorist attacks in Kenya. Look, the answer is most of the country agrees that we need to know more about the people coming into our borders. And, you know, this piece I wrote today also talked about how Angela Merkel came out, very critical of Trump's executive order, while at the same time she is pressing very hard to get refugees out of Germany. They have a problem. We know they have a problem, and we don't want this problem.
All right. We have a problem with your audio, and I apologize, Liz. We're going to reconnect real quick with Liz Peek. We apologize for that. Sometimes that happens with Skype, and we'll get her reconnected here real quickly so we can hear her a little bit better. And again, the column that she's referring to, you may want to check it out there at foxnews.com. And she also writes for Fiscal Times, and so let us take a quick break, and we'll reconnect with her, and we'll be right back.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back to Focus Today, and I think we got all our technical things worked out. Delighted to have back with us today Liz Peek. She's a columnist for foxnews.com and Fiscal Times, and we're talking about the Ninth Circuit and what it did in stopping the president's immigration policy. Thank you, Liz, for working with us on that. Sorry about that. Let me ask you, where do we go from here? Because the president said he probably would introduce another policy statement today, whether it's executive order, I don't know, but with the Ninth Circuit trigger happy the way it is, it looks like he could be challenged on every move.
Well, frankly, at this point, I think they need to go back to the drawing board now that he has an attorney general in place, which, of course, has been part of the issue here. So many of the departments and divisions of the government have lacked leadership because the Democrats have stalled confirmation hearings on Trump's nominees. Now we do have Jeff Sessions in place. Hopefully he'll be able to work with Trump's office and get a order in place that perhaps solves some of the issues that came up. Some of it was sloppiness on the part of the White House, such as not making it clear what green card holders' status would be and not carving out exemptions for some groups of people like translators and so forth who've been helpful to us in Iraq. So let's hope that they do it right. The circuit court seemed to open the door to a different kind of order that resolves some of the questions that they had. But look, I mean, as somebody who thinks that Donald Trump's agenda, by and large, is good for this country, it's very disheartening to see the amount of resistance that's raised on all fronts, not just the media. We expect that, but obviously from Democrats in Congress, they are blocking and slowing every move he makes. And, it's sort of sapping the energy. I actually think Donald Trump needs to leave the White House for a day, go out and talk to people in Ohio or Florida or someplace where I think he still gets a great reception and talk about what he's trying to do and bring the people on board. That, he can't lose the enthusiasm of his support, because then, I mean, everything will just sort of go downhill, and that would really be a tragedy for the country.
I agree with you. I think one of the mistakes was that he's not being a little bit more transparent on some of his moves prior to that. We'll see where that goes. I think going out and being in front of the people and rallying the people, that's what Reagan did, and he was very successful at it. But there's also an increase, not that there ever is a less increase of security around this president, but because of the resistance and the pushback, I understand presidential security is an all-time high.
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, I think there's so much hate out there, which, let's face it, has been ginned up by the media. When you see these reports of people being afraid, why are they afraid of Trump? I mean, the gay community, we're told, is afraid, and the immigrant community is afraid, because the media has so misrepresented what he's trying to do that, of course, they have led to some fear, and they've also led to a lot of bitterness and hatred and acrimony. So it's not all the media's fault. Donald Trump has walked into some of this stuff, but, it doesn't surprise me that security is pretty tight. I think one of the big questions that's been raised by this whole episode with Michael Flynn, the security director, NSC director, is, where does the intelligence community stand vis-a-vis Donald Trump? Are they going to undermine his presidency? Are they going to constantly be leaking materials that are damaging and that would not, be acceptable under any presidency? I don't know, but, he's going to have to get his house in order a little bit. And someone this morning on a TV show I was on said, he's lost an asset in Michael Flynn because he was a spy. He knows how these guys work. And I think he's probably right. This is sort of we're now in damage control, but also there's some damage done, and that's unfortunate.
Well, the General Flynn thing brings up a couple of things. First of all, he was obviously pretty active before he became head of the intelligence advisory. That's number one. And number two, the continuing leaks coming out of the Security Department.
Right.
This is really not good. I mean, are these leftover Obama administration people trying to damage the president? Where do you think this is coming from?
Well, I think the answer to that is probably yes. There are, after all, after 8 years, there's a pretty embedded constituency that is loyal to the prior administration. And again, when I say Trump has brought some of this on himself, unfortunately, he has taken on the intelligence community several times, said disparaging things about them, and their backs are up, and again, that's not good. To the extent that Flynn was exposed inappropriately by intelligence operatives, we may never know who did that, and that's kind of a scary thing, frankly, because they could equally reveal private conversations amongst Rex Tillerson, our new Secretary of State, and other foreign ministers. I mean, this has got to stop. I think it is very, very damaging, not just to Trump, but look, at some point, this stuff becomes disloyal to the country because it hurts the country. It hurts the image of the United States abroad if we can't control our security.
Well, it just seems to me that the circle must be kind of tight these days, that they could track some of this down.
Yeah, you would think, right?
Yeah, it's just absolutely amazing. So who do you think will replace Flynn?
I don't know. I really think there's some reasonableness to the idea that maybe they should not have so many military people. Maybe this would be a good place. Well, John Bolton's name has come up. I've gotten to know John Bolton through appearances on Fox and stuff, and just, hanging out in the green room together. I don't know him terribly well, but I have to say I really like him. He's a very modest, straight talker, someone I think incredibly trustworthy. Now, he's hawkish, there's no question, and that may be worrisome to people who want to have a little balance in the National Security Council. But I must say, I think he's a very good guy. I think these generals, somebody told me a few weeks ago, and I thought this was really an interesting comment at the time, that Flynn would not last very long. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, well, he's sort of a renegade 3-star surrounded by 4 stars. That just doesn't work. And I sort of think, in the military, there is such a chain of command notion. There's such a hierarchy that maybe having another general is not a good idea. Maybe you really do need to have a civilian in that post. Again, John Bolton comes to mind. I'm sure there are other candidates.
That is very interesting. I never thought of that. Wow. So what about this resistance, Liz? It's amazing. I mean, look what happened in Berkeley, no arrests. It continues to happen. It seems to be with no lack of energy. I mean, in fact, anything, it's building. And it looks like maybe George Soros is funding some of this. They're being trained to go into public meetings and disrupt. I mean, is this anarchy at our expense?
Well, you have to kind of hope it'll burn itself out. The biggest eruptions, astonishing to me, were over Betsy DeVos, the person that was finally confirmed as education secretary. And we know where that came from. That came from the teachers' unions who are under attack, or they feel that they're under attack by an administration that would like to shake up our education establishment. Boy, do we need it. If there's ever a portion of the government that is protecting this, where protecting the status quo is simply unacceptable, it is education. We are not educating our kids. And yesterday, once again, I was talking to a small business owner in the heartland out in Pennsylvania who said they can't hire people with the skills needed to do manufacturing. What are those skills? Reading, writing, and basic arithmetic. We're not talking about nuclear scientists here. We're talking about kids graduating from high school who can't perform fairly standard operations and don't have the skills that any kid coming out of school should have. The fact that the NAACP came out in their annual gathering in opposition to charter schools, I think is stunning. I don't know how the teachers' unions have got their tentacles around so many organizations, but if there is one group that should be advocating, as, by the way, there are African Americans like Jeffrey Canada in the forefront of this movement for school choice, that is the African American community should be all over that. Whether Betsy DeVos is their pick or not, they should not line up. Anyway, to answer your question, I think that we're just going to have continued pushback on things where the establishment authorities are being disrupted. I think we need it. I think that's what voters wanted, but it's not easy.
I've always been an advocate of school choice, and I don't know if it can actually be pulled off, but just think about it. If your tax dollars could follow your child, what that would do to public education in the capitalistic atmosphere of competition.
Well, that's right. I mean, and it's sort of sad, you hear people, Justice Sotomayor, and other people who are very proud of their high schools and their public school background. And, of course, we still have some terrific public schools in this country, but far, far too many communities do not have access to good education for their kids. That is a basic right. People talk very carelessly in our country about rights, but you know what? That seems to me to be a basic right, and it's one that is ignored and trampled all the time. So anyway, I'm very passionate about this because the hypocrisy on the left, people who talk, very convincingly about how they want to get rid of income inequality or narrow income inequality and narrow the pay gap and stuff. Well, how does that start anywhere but in our public schools? Mm-hmm. And by the way, it's not a money issue. We spend more per student than almost any country on earth. It is an effectiveness issue, and the effectiveness is dumbed down by work rules that the teachers' unions have put in place that really hurt our students. So excuse me for getting off on this rant, but honestly, it makes me crazy. And to have all these people out demonstrating, shame on them.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. I would hope she's successful in charter schools and school choice, and really go for it and give parents a real option on how their kids can be educated, because we know that a vast majority of these educational dollars never make it to the classroom, and that in itself is a big problem. All right, let me swing you over to another part of your expertise, and that is the economy and inflation. And the Dow is maintaining above 20,000, barely so, but it is there. Is inflation inevitable?
Well, in some respects, and, don't kill me for saying this, you kind of want some inflation back because that would mean that wages are probably going up. That's what has been the big surprise, right, particularly in the last year, that even as unemployment numbers have come down, which presumably and historically have bumped up wage rates, you really haven't seen that, which, by the way, is why I think these unemployment numbers are kind of bogus. I think there are many more people out there looking for full-time work than the government has been willing to acknowledge. But anyway, there is probably some increase on the horizon of inflation, but it's muted today by, again, no big increase in wages so far, and also by the strong dollar. To the extent that we're importing things, we're paying for it with very strong dollars, and that, it tends to bring your prices down. The other thing, of course, that hasn't really shown much variability lately is oil prices. Oil prices are holding right around $52 a barrel or thereabouts, but they're not going down anymore. So it was the case, a year or so ago that declining oil and gasoline prices were making up for increases elsewhere. Bottom line, I don't see much inflation ahead. I don't see, factories are operating, I think the number's something like 70% of capacity. There's no big push there. So until we see wages really strongly moving up, I don't think we'll see much inflation.
Okay, so the sanctions against Iran are beginning to have a little bit of an impact. But what if they go for the ultimate sanction, and that is, since the oil is regulated by the value of the dollar, what if we want to put sanctions on imported oil from Iran? What does that do?
Well, we're not importing oil from Iran, so I'm not sure.
Just overall OPEC prices, I guess. You're talking $53 a barrel now. I guess it can hold there, but we've seen it below that.
Well, right now you have a production limiting agreement amongst OPEC participants aimed at keeping the price around there. It's not high enough to bring on a lot of incremental sources of oil, which historically has been sort of the reason oil prices then fall apart. At this level, this is not a generous oil price for Saudi Arabia, Iran, or certainly Russia. That has been, in a sense, as you say, the ultimate sanction on the Middle Eastern countries and on Russia, that oil prices have been so low. At $100 a barrel, Russia's doing very well economically. So is Iran, so is everybody else. 52, not so much. But Iran does have the opportunity to increase production. My experience with OPEC is they always cheat, and Iran is a reluctant participant at best in this agreement. So Iran will start, ramping up exports. I think actually the degree that they've been able to do that has surprised some observers. But we're not going to shut down Iran's missile program, I don't think, through sanctions. I mean, we've been doing that for a long time. They are pretty intransigent on the issue of, these missile tests and so forth being outside of any kind of agreements, international agreements. Look, they want to, like any embattled regime, any authoritarian regime, the best thing they can do to protect themselves, which is what Putin does too, is basically find another party to be the demon in their lives and to protect against. And the reason for all these missile tests and so forth is they continue to tell Iranians that we're going to attack them any day now, or Israel will attack them any day now, and they need these for self-defense. I am sure there are many Iranians who don't believe that, but meanwhile, it's a show of force, and it satisfies their political needs, It works for them, in other words.
Of course, today we got Prime Minister Netanyahu at the White House. By the way, he's going in the front door, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
And they're saying that primarily the discussion between the two leaders will be Iran, maybe a little bit about moving the embassy to Jerusalem, but mostly about Iran and this very thing, and that is that they are doing these missile testing. They are waving their saber in the air, and there's another eye now on North Korea doing the same thing. It can't be totally ignored.
No, it can't be. I mean, I would argue that while George W. Bush left Obama with a real financial and fiscal crisis on his hands, Obama left Trump with a real world crisis on his hands. I think North Korea, the Obama administration very casually said on the way out the door, "No, yes, by the way, the big problem is North Korea," about which, of course, they had done absolutely nothing. In fact, you could argue that to appease Russia and China, they had bent over backwards vis-a-vis North Korea, not put in the missile protection system that was supposed to go into effect, and it basically, left North Korea emboldened, and now a huge problem for Donald Trump, because he is, he has made his posture to the world that America is strong. We are not going to put up with this. I don't know what you do about North Korea. I mean, frankly, I don't know why they don't sneak some people in and maybe kidnap. Just kidding.
Yeah.
But it's really, this single guy does seem to be an unbelievable problem for the civilized world, and I don't know what you do about it. I think you have to lean on China. The problem for Obama was, all he wanted from China, or the big thing in our negotiations with China for the last 8 years, has been this very, to my mind, half-hearted climate agreement that China signed on to, where they didn't really promise anything, but we were thrilled to get their signature on an agreement. In deference to China and getting that accord in place, we let almost every other issue go by, including North Korea. And now I think it's really kind of come home to haunt us.
Yeah, I don't know what you do with North Korea. It's amazing. Apparently, one of the stories that came out yesterday, that leader even did away with his stepbrother. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know what you do.
You wouldn't want to be related to him. I think it's clear. Earlier last year, if you remember, he killed his uncle, who was supposed to be a very close relative too. Blood ties don't mean much, apparently, in North Korea.
Wow. All right. So do you think that if the United States decided to work with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and literally move the embassy from Tel Aviv up to Jerusalem, and that would have to be coordinated with, obviously, the Prime Minister, but it is a provocative move. Do you think it'll get done?
Well, I think as we have sort of backed off on the issue of settlements and taken a somewhat more traditional line on settlements, I think it probably, as the language was, it wouldn't help the peace process. I'm not sure how moving the capital would help the peace process. My son was on TV last night talking about this issue, and I think he was totally right. I mean, his point on the settlements discussion was the United States has always encouraged Israel to rein in the spread of settlements. But the issue is you don't do it publicly, you do it privately. And I think the real damning thing about Obama signing on to the UN censuring of Israel was all of a sudden it was a public affirmation that this was going against U.S. policy. And I'm really quoting our son here, but I think that was a provocative move and changed pretty radically our whole attitude and response to Israel. It's going to be interesting to see whether we now just sort of go back to the prior status quo where, again, in private, perhaps we're saying, hey, you got to cut out the settlement expansion, but publicly we're very supportive of Israel. And I think that might be what happens, but I don't know.
All right, I've only got about 30 seconds left. The president continues to tweet. Does that bother you?
I don't mind that, because I do think it means he can communicate with the American people and not be always interpreted by the liberal media. However, I would love to see a speed bump. I would like to see somebody whose eyes are on those tweets before they go out the door. And I don't know who that would be. I mean, historically, I think Kellyanne Conway's the right person. Yeah, maybe. Just one set of eyes, that's all. Because we all know at 3 in the morning in our pajamas, we have a lot of thoughts that may not have been totally thought through. And I think we've seen some of those.
Gotta go. Thanks, Liz. You're a delight.
All right.
Have a great day.
Much.
Thanks for your time. All right. Check her out at foxnews.com and Fiscal Times. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.